Hello everyone, and welcome to another Top 5 Records video. Today on this very special record store day. Now, why is this a very special record store day? Because we got a lot of very interesting releases, and I'm doing a lot of videos about some of the titles that I bought. Too many titles to buy, actually, but even way too many titles interesting to buy. In this video, I'm going to be talking about a special release of Peter Gabriel's OVO. Now, what is this and why is it special? First of all, this is the first time that this Peter Gabriel album got released on vinyl. Why? Because this is not a new album. This record is from, I believe, 2000. It has to do with the origin of this record. And the best thing to do is to describe it in the words of Peter Gabriel himself. I'm going to read from the inner sleeve of disc 1 because Gabriel himself wrote about it in the most perfect way. Because this record, the context is very, very, very important to understand. Here we go. At the end of 1997, I was invited by Mark Fisher to join him in creating a visual and musical experience for London's Millennium Dome. We spent the first year brainstorming ideas on a narrative and visual concept. We were asked to do something that reflects a bit of past, the present, and the future. So I suggested we develop the plot around the struggles of 3 generations of a family. We thought we would do this in 3 acts. In Act 1, nature is the focus, and it is based in agricultural, prehistoric times. Act 2 is our industrialized period. And finally, Act 3 moves into the future, integrating nature and technology. OVO tells the story of 3 stages of our evolution through the lives of these 3 generations. It is about a family in transition, divided by internal conflicts and by the great changes going around them. It is also a love story. We have a father, Theo, who loves the earth and everything that grows from it, who finds a way to work with nature even though he only knows one way, his way. A mother, Beth, who sits at her loom and sees the future emerging in the patterns she weaves, is unable to reconcile her feuding family and eventually turns against her own son. A son, Ian, with a passion for machines, starts a revolution which was designed to liberate his people, but ends up enslaving them. And a daughter, Sophia, whose quiet and enchanted childhood ends when she falls in love with one of the mysterious sky people, Skyboy. She eventually divides both her father and brother for love and leads her people away from destruction. Skyboy turns from Romeo to rebel and he watches his people being excluded and oppressed by Ian's expanding industrial empire. OVO, Sophia, and Skyboy's child, born in the time of the flood, is sent into an uncertain future in a floating nest that sails the sky. Last year I concentrated on the music. I drew from the traditional British folk references with the help of Richard Evans and Simon Emerson, both of whom know a lot more about the subject, and then tried to develop the music that reflected many of the different cultures that make up contemporary Britain. Although they may not always be obvious, there are influences and elements of Asian, African, Caribbean, Middle Eastern, Australian, and European musical traditions. From 12th century hurdy-gurdy to didgeridoo, from the pulsing rhythms of the Dole Fountain to the nostalgic brass of the Black Dyke Band, from Arab lemons over drum and bass to meditative moments with string section. The soundtrack is a real mix. I have really enjoyed working with the singers. All of them have added a lot to the music. Elizabeth Fraser, Paul Buchanan, Yara O'Leonard, Nenek Cherry, and Richie Havens are some of my favorite voices, and I was delighted that they were willing to take part. Their performances covered a real range of emotions that brought the OVO family to life. Now, why did I read that? Because with OVO, we are not discussing a traditional music album, nor a traditional soundtrack. It really has to do with what happened in London's Millennium Dome. Because there is an important element of narrative here in the music. And when I'm reading out the synopsis and when I've listened to this record, my first response is not, oh my god, this is a brilliant story. Honestly, when musicians tell a concept or make a concept album or a opera or try to pronounce a story within an album, pretty often you notice that their storytelling in a lifetime has focused on songs in a certain specific moment. I'm going to take some harsh examples. I love the Pretty Things SF Sorrows, but the narrative of the entire album, it's rather a mess. It goes in loads of different directions. If you listen to Tommy without having seen the film, because director Ken Russell really makes something out of it, but it's a narrative that goes any other way. It's a little bit messy, these operas by musicians. Same can be said for Peter Gabriel. Yet, you do need to have an awareness of its concept, the fact that it was a Millennium Dome performance, that it is of that it comes from a artistic storytelling, um, that there is a narrative to understand where he is going, because Gabriel is, how do I say this, um, ambitious. He's really ambitious. He mentions that in his piece. And not only does he take influences from different countries, this is a record with genres. The record actually opens with R&B, and I thought, oh my God, are we going to listen to a concept piece that is full of R&B? Because I did not dig it. I did not like the rap. I wasn't into it. It didn't feel authentic for me. I like rap. But you gotta have a good rapper. Where a rapper is coming from, what they're telling, where they're going. The identity is so important. Rap in a performance or concept or a lyric written by somebody else. Ooh, it can be kitschy, and that is the situation here on the first track, the story of OVO. But after that song, everything changes. Everything changes. And this record keeps constantly changing, not in a normal pop or rock record kind of way, but in a more of a conceptual piece way. Because we get into ambient music, we get into classical music, we get into neoclassical music. And as a whole, this is a rather interesting piece of work. Not a normal album, not a normal rock opera, not a normal film score or a normal soundtrack. It is rather unique. And this Record Store Day release does present it in a very well. They took care of this release, and it was a. I think the number is pretty limited because I found only one copy, and I was early on in the store this morning. But I'll show you through the packaging. I just showed you the inner sleeve with the first disc on blue vinyl. And then there's a second disc. And that comes on orange vinyl. But wait, there's more. There is actually a rather thick, worked out booklet. And that is the story of OVO presented as a graphic novel. I think that shows that this is a big, interesting, experimental piece of work. And it's a release that, if you're going to dive into it, take your time, go through the booklet. Peter Gabriel is an interesting artist. He's not one of my favorites, but I'm constantly intrigued by the fact that he's trying to find new means. Did this land with me in its entirety? No, not me personally, but it is a grand and interesting, good sounding. Although I mean, it's a half speed remaster, and I'm normally not a fan of it, but I have little reference. But nevertheless, it sounded good. It's good mastered, good produced release, and I think there's something to say for that. So I'm really curious if for anyone who got it, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Leave a comment below, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.